Looking for the answer. Miami sun, where I know that bitches love when it rain. My mother's son, but all my cronies keep it a day. Been through the system, but I ain't tryna go through it again. Shooter on parole, and I know that you shoot it again. For the ops and their friends, I'm too real to pretend. All that time in the trap, got me timing.
Good morning, world, and welcome back to What the Fuck Happened This Week. My name is C Brave, and welcome to your new home for real news where we cut through the noise with no fluff, no corporate spin, and absolutely zero bull. Every week, we break down the biggest stories in politics, pop culture, world events, and everything in between with sharp insights, raw honesty, and a perspective you won't get anywhere else. Before we get into it, I want to thank you for your support. If you enjoy the content, make sure you like, subscribe, and share the video. It helps the channel grow and it keeps independent journalism alive. I am an independent journalist, not a corporate newsroom. Everything in today's episode was gathered from publicly available sources, credible outlets, and reputable platform. I do my best to bring you accurate, balanced information, but if you catch anything that needs correction or clarification, feel free to drop it in the comments. Alright, enough of the intro. Let's not waste any more time. Let's find out what the happened this week. New Year's resolution didn't start as gym membership or diet plans. They started as promises with consequences. Around 4,000 years ago in Babylon, people celebrated a new year with a 12-day festival called Akitu. Their resolution weren't optional goals. They promised to repay back debts, return borrowed tools, and keep their word, because failing meant divine punishment. Resolution worked because accountability existed. That tradition carried into ancient Rome. The Romans made vows to Janus, the god who looked backward and forward. These weren't about comfort, they were about character, loyalty, and ethical living. Christianity later internalized the process. By the Middle Ages, the new year became a time for self-examination, confession, and moral renewal. Still serious, still accountable. Today, resolutions are personal, secular, and mostly consequence-free. And today, the statistics tell the story. Percent who sets resolution, and the percent who keeps them long-term by country and region. In Canada, 31% of Canadians set resolution. About 27% keep some, and 18% fully succeed. In the United States, 30 to 38% of Americans set resolution. About 8 to 9% fully achieve them. In the United Kingdom, 35 to 40% set resolution, and about 28% keep all, and 17% keep none. In Europe, there's an average of 35 to 40% set resolution, and the majority fail by February. In Asia, 30 to 35% set resolution with low long-term adherence. Latin America, 45 to 50% set resolution, most fail within months. Globally, about 1 in 3 adults sets a resolution. Roughly 75% quit within the first month. Only 8% succeed long-term. No matter the country, the culture, or systems, the pattern is strikingly consistent. So why do they fail? This isn't a motivation problem, it's a structural problem. Ancient resolution worked because they were tied to values. They carried consequences. Someone, gods, society, or conscience held you accountable. Modern resolution are usually, I hope I change. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Hope alone doesn't create lasting change. The real meaning, historically, a resolution wasn't, I hope I change. It was, I will live differently and I will be held to it. So where are we today? We take accountability out of the equation, then we act surprised when over 75% fail by February. Here's the takeaway. Do New Year's resolution work? Not the way we practice them today. They only work when goals and specific habits replace motivation, accountability existed. The new year doesn't change anyone. Discipline, values, and actions do. We talked about resolution across history, from ancient vows to modern goal setting. Back then, they worked because they were tied to values, accountability, and consequences. Today, most people fail for the same reasons. Vague goals, fading motivation, and no accountability. Now, vision boards can help. I don't know if you guys know this exercise, but they do clarify direction and reinforce habits, but success still comes down to execution. The people who win do a few simple things. They take specific action, they track their progress from mistakes and small wins, but more importantly, above all else, they stay consistent. The calendar won't change you, actions will. So if you want to be a part of a few who actually follow through, get up, dress up, show up, get it done. That's how you stop quitting and start becoming. While personal change is often framed as an individual responsibility, some struggles are shaped by systems far larger than any one person, which brings us to our next story. When people talk about women's rights, the conversation usually jumps straight to politics. But if you slow it down and actually look at history, the story is way more grounded than people think. This isn't about slogans, it's about how society changed and what the data says changed with it. For most of human history, women weren't legally independent. No voting rights, no property ownership without a man, limited access to education or income. That mattered because if you can't earn, you can't own, you can't leave, you're structurally dependent. And dependency always shapes power. That's not just an opinion, that's how systems work. I heard an interesting perspective from a Muslim friend. I'm a Christian, by the way, but I try to stay open minded and unbiased. He said that Adam and Eve sinned by eating the forbidden fruit of knowledge, but as a result, they realized that they were naked and they clothed themselves. Now, do you think that that is a sin or is that a blessing? My friend's point is this: yes, although Adam and Eve sinned, something good came from it. And that idea always stuck with me because history often works the same way. Sometimes dark events bring uncomfortable awareness, and that awareness forces change. World War I and later World War II were among the most darkest moments humanity has ever faced. Millions died, cities were destroyed, societies fractured. But something unexpected happened. Women stepped in, running factories, hospitals, farms, and supply chains. They didn't help. They carried the entire nation on their back. No guidance, no roadmaps, just enormous expectation, and they rose to meet them. Once competence is demonstrated at scale, the argument against capability collapses. Women's liberation didn't grow out of theory, it grew out of reality. Voting rights, workforce access, financial independence, these weren't symbolic wins, they were escape routes. If you can earn your own money, you can leave. If you can vote, you can influence laws. If you can own property, you aren't trapped by survival. Liberation wasn't about replacing men, it was about reducing vulnerability. Now, this is where the conversation needs to be adult. Globally, about 1 in 3 women has experienced physical or sexual violence in her lifetime, most often by the current or former partner. And here's the key part: that number has barely changed in decades, despite legal reforms, awareness campaigns, and social progress. Yeah, y'all thought this was going to be easy to listen to. It's not. So brace yourself because it gets worse. Each year, around 50,000 women and girls are killed by intimate partners or family members. That's over 130 women every day, roughly 6 women every hour, or 1 woman in every 10 minutes. Just sit with that for a second. And roughly 60% of women who are murdered or killed by someone close to them. Not strangers, not random attacks, home. Now, let's talk about countries with strong women's rights. In North America, including Canada, women have voting rights, education, workplace protection, and legal equality. Yet the violence hasn't disappeared. In Canada, nearly 80% of police reported intimate partner violence victims are women. Women experience partner violence at more than 3 times the rate of men. Rates have not declined over the past decade, they've increased in recent years. These are not failures of the law on paper, they are failures of behavior in reality. Many people assume that in countries where women have fewer rights, where religion or law restriction autonomy, the violence must be far worse. But the numbers complicate the assumption. When researchers measure lifetime intimate partner violence prevalence, the rate across regions are often shockingly similar, whether in Western liberal democracies or more traditional societies. In Europe and North America, about 22 to 25% of women report physical or sexual violence by a partner. In Africa and Southeast Asia, it's about 31 to 33%. In Eastern Mediterranean regions, which includes many Muslim majority countries, it's around 31%. Even in the Western Pacific, it's still about 1 in 5 women. Different cultures, different religion, different laws. Yet the same reality, between 1 in 5 and 1 in 3 women experience partner violence worldwide. And these numbers don't lie. They're revealing and they are telling. So when people ask, why do women's rights still matter? This is why. History shows us why independence was necessary. The data shows us where danger still exists. You can acknowledge progress and recognize unresolved risk at the same time. That's not contradiction, that's maturity. Women didn't gain rights because society felt generous. They gained them because reality demanded change. And history reminds us that God often moves through uncomfortable moments. So progress doesn't mean pretending everything is solved. It means being honest about where protection still fails across continents, across religion, across laws. Women are still being hurt and killed by the men closest to them. The mirror doesn't show culture, it doesn't show religion, it shows men. And until men stop, listen, and rethink their role in power, conflict, and accountability in both their actions and their silence, the numbers will keep telling the same story. Truth, data, responsibility, not slogans, not politics, not excuses, and it starts at home. Fathers need to stop abandoning their families. Be a man, not a coward. How you act teaches your son how to treat a woman. Mothers also need to show love and compassion to their sons. The way you raise your children, the boundaries you set, the respect you show teaches them how to speak, how to act, and what lines they can and cannot cross. Everything starts at home. And I say all that to say this. Tupac said it best in his music. Since we all came from a woman, got our name from a woman, our game from a woman, I think it's time to kill for our women, time to heal our women, be real to our women. We need to respect and celebrate our women, not just on special occasion, but in the way we live our lives every single day. To understand where these struggles come from, we sometimes have to look far beyond the present and into history itself. For centuries, history has told us that power in the medieval world belonged exclusively to men, kings, warriors, and bishops. But a recent archaeological discovery is forcing historians to rethink that narrative. Archaeologists in England have uncovered a 1300-year-old medieval grave belonging to a woman, and not just any woman. Based on what was buried with her, researchers believe she was extremely wealthy and deeply connected to the early Christian church. This burial site dates back to early medieval period, a time when Christianity was still spreading across Britain. What makes this grave remarkable isn't just its age, it's what was found inside. The woman was buried with an extraordinary gold and gemstone necklace, featuring intricate craftsmanship rarely seen in elite male burials of that time. Alongside the jewelry were Christian symbols, suggesting she held an important religious identity or role. Women during this period were almost never buried with this level of wealth or religious symbolism, unless they held real authority. Historians believe she may have been a religious leader, possibly an abbess, a woman who oversaw monasteries, land, wealth, and spiritual leadership. In some cases, abbess answered directly to kings, not bishops. In other words, this woman likely held economic power, religious influence, and social status in a world we often assume denied women all three. What's also fascinating is how rare this kind of burial is. Most medieval woman's grave contains modest items, if anything at all. This grave stands out as one of the richest female burials ever discovered in Britain from this era. She was not alone. This discovery doesn't stand entirely on its own. Archaeologists working at other medieval sites in Britain have uncovered burial grounds where unusual large numbers of women were laid to rest together, in carefully organized plot that suggests shared purpose and identity. This wasn't random and it wasn't accidental. The placement of the graves and artifacts found with them and the consistency in burial styles strongly suggests organized female religious life, possibly some of the earliest form of convent-like communities. This suggests the woman buried with immense wealth may not have been an isolated exception, but part of a broader tradition of influential religious women. Some of these women likely taught, managed land, preserved religious texts, and provided spiritual leadership during the time when the church itself was still taking shape. So the story isn't just about one powerful woman, it's about many. And it raises a bigger question. How many more powerful women existed in history but were erased because they didn't leave written records? Archaeology relies on physical evidence and careful interpretation of what that evidence reveals. And this evidence tells us that women weren't just present in medieval religious life. Some of them helped build and shaped it. This discovery doesn't rewrite history, it fills in the parts history left out, and reminds us that power, faith, and influence have never belonged to just one gender, even when the history book says otherwise. And while history reshapes how we see the past, innovation today is reshaping how communities support one another. In Saskatchewan, the Regina Food Bank has opened what's being called Canada's first full-scale free grocery store. The store looks like a regular supermarket with aisles, carts, fresh produce, and full refrigerators. Instead of receiving pre-packaged food boxes, registered clients can shop for themselves, taking home up to $200 worth of groceries every 2 weeks, enough for 7 to 10 days. The goal is to respect dietary needs, allergies, and cultural preferences. Organizers say that this model could help feed 25% more than traditional food hampers. The project was made possible through $3.7 million in donation, including a $1 million gift from the Mosaic Company. Now here's my take. I think this is a fantastic idea. I remember something Louis Farrakhan said, just because something becomes the norm doesn't mean it's normal. It reminded me of going to the food bank as a kid, waiting in line to get a hamper. Even as a child, I was embarrassed to line up and wait for our turn to be handed a hamper. Sometimes the food inside wasn't even something we liked. There's a saying, beggars can't be choosers, and I hate to use the word beggar. And yes, while we were grateful, it didn't feel good not having any choice. My parents were immigrants who fled the Vietnam War, like many other families during that time. They had to learn a new language and adapt to a new way of life. We started with nothing, but we worked really hard together to build a life in a new country. So, I'm fully supportive of initiatives that allow people dignity and choice while meeting their basic needs. I also think this approach is great for food logistics. Many businesses discard items due to minor imperfection or damage. That don't make the product unsafe. A milk jug dropped on the floor, a slightly dented can, these could still feed families in need instead of going to waste. I've worked in logistics for well over 15 years, and I have personally seen how much perfectly good food gets tossed because of strict quality control rules. Meanwhile, people around the world sift through garbage searching for edible food. We need to rethink how we help people in this country. No family, no child should go to bed hungry. Free grocery stores like this offer more than just food. They give people optionality and dignity in what they take home. They allow families to make choices, feel respected, and keep their independence, even when times are tough. Great job, Saskatchewan. Neighboring provinces should learn from this dignified, bold move. And that's our story. The False Claim Act is a law most people don't think about until it hits a headline. Originally passed during the Civil War, the False Claim Act was specifically created to target contractors who attempted to defraud the government, make it clear that false claim against federal funds would not be tolerated. This law includes, but is not limited to, overcharging for supplies, selling defective goods, or misrepresenting contracts. It's a federal law, part of the National Legal Framework or umbrella law, which means the Department of Justice can enforce it anywhere in the country. Today, the law is in the news for a reason few expected. The FCA allows the government to sue anyone who knowingly submit false claim for federal funds or property. Violators can be subject to triple damages plus fines. Private citizens called whistleblowers can sue on the government's behalf and receive a percentage of recovery funds. For decades, it has been used to combat fraud in healthcare, defense contracting, and government programs, including pandemic relief. Here's the key development. Under the Trump administration, the Justice Department is reportedly using the FCA to investigate corporate diversity, equity, inclusion programs. Companies with federal contracts certify compliance with anti-discrimination laws. DOJ allege some diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives may conflict with those laws. If those certifications are false, it could trigger the FCA. In short, a law once reserved for financial fraud is now being applied to corporate diversity programs. Investigations reportedly include major corporations like Google, Verizon, other federal contractors across industries, pharmaceuticals, utilities could also face scrutiny. While no lawsuits have been filed yet, the mere threat of FCA enforcement is prompting companies to reevaluate or adjust DEI policies. Legal experts note that this is unprecedented. The FCA was designed for financial fraud, not workplace programs. Critics argue that this could politicize a law intended to prevent fraud. At the same time, classic FCA cases continue in healthcare, defense, and PPP loan fraud, meaning that the law remains a powerful tool for accountability. Now, here's my take, and I want to be real clear about this. This is commentary, not a verified fact. Trump spent decades as an entrepreneur. He's dealt with high stake negotiations, legal challenges, and undoubtedly people bragging about questionable practices. Sammy the Bull Gravano, the former Gambino underboss, claimed in a recent interview that him and his people once tried to extort Trump, but Trump did not waver. The lesson here in business and politics: Trump is strategic and calculated. He doesn't act impulsively, he acts with purpose. So when you see the DOJ applying the FCA in new ways, it's worth paying attention. This is someone who understands incentives, risk, and leverage, and how systems actually work. Trump's a smart guy until he opens his mouth without a filter. But I mean, regardless of that fact, I'm here for it. Let's wait and see what actually comes out of this. The False Claim Act is more than a legal tool, it's a lens into accountability, risk, and the complexity of the government oversight. The law is evolving, corporations are adjusting, and history shows that the federal funds are not free to spend without scrutiny. Understanding these developments require not just headlines, but context, perspective, and a grasp of the strategic decisions behind them. And speaking of federal funds and accountability, this isn't just theory, it's happening right now. Just this week, the Trump administration froze $185 million in federal child care funding to Minnesota, citing allegations of widespread fraud. That's right. Money meant to support low-income families and child care providers is on hold until the state can prove it's being spent legitimately. This is a textbook example of a False Claim Act in action. Alleged misuse of federal dollars triggers scrutiny, audits, and if necessary, legal consequences. It shows that whether you're a corporation with federal contracts or a state managing social programs, federal funds come with rules, and breaking them can carry serious consequences. What makes this story particularly interesting is how it highlights the tension between protecting taxpayers and ensuring essential services keep running. Families in Minnesota are caught in the middle while the government investigates, demonstrating the real-world stakes of law we often only read about in textbooks. The Department of Health and Human Services announces the freeze this week, saying Minnesota must provide strict documentation proving the funds are being used properly. They're asking for receipts, audits, and even photos to verify services were actually delivered. Until then, no money will flow. This is a direct example of the federal government using laws with False Claim Act to hold organizations, even entire states, accountable for how federal dollars are spent. The allegation: some providers billed for services that were never delivered or otherwise misrepresented the use of funds. For families and child care providers in Minnesota, this is huge. Imagine running a daycare that depends on federal subsidies. Now your funding could be frozen while the state proves it's playing by the rules. That's disruption in services, uncertainty for employees, and added stress for parents who rely on childcare to work. This isn't unique to Minnesota. Anytime federal funds are involved, accountability rules come with serious teeth, whether it's healthcare, contracting, PPP loans, or childcare. The federal government is saying, if you misuse federal money, there are consequences. And here's the twist. Just like in diversity, equity, inclusion investigation under the FCA, the government is stretching traditional enforcement to new areas, showing that laws like the False Claim Act aren't just relics. They're a tool to protect taxpayer dollars and enforce compliance wherever federal money flows. Now the ball is in Minnesota's court. State officials must prove these funds are being used correctly, or the freeze could continue, affecting thousands of families and providers. Meanwhile, this story serves as a wake up call. Federal funds are a privilege, not a guarantee. Mismanagement, even accidental, can bring consequences fast, and sometimes the people who rely on those funds are the ones who feel the impact the most. The lesson is simple: federal dollars aren't free money, they come with rules, and breaking them, intentionally or not, can have real consequences. From diversity, equity, inclusion programs to child subsidies, accountability is non negotiable. And for anyone managing government funds, the message is clear: keep meticulous records, follow the law, understand that the government is watching. Now, I'm from Canada, and we've seen firsthand how taxpayer money gets stretched, sometimes well beyond what was promised. Since Justin Trudeau first took office in 2015, Canada's federal debt has roughly doubled from about 616 billion to well over 1.2 trillion. That's a massive increase in just under a decade. Servicing that debt alone now costs Canadians about $2,000 per person each year in interest payments, with total debt service charging hitting around 92.5 billion in 2024 and 2025, more than what the government spends on some major social programs. Which is exactly why people lose their minds over spending at every level. From mayors being grilled about overpriced local projects and stadium deals that cost taxpayer hundreds of millions, to residents asking, how much did that even cost? Take Montreal Olympic Stadium, for example, built for the 1976 Olympic. It cost over 1.1 billion, way over budget, and the debt wasn't fully paid off for decades. Now Quebec is planning 870 million just to replace the roof. In Vancouver, upgrades to BC Place Stadium for the 2026 FIFA World Cup is projected to top $500 million, with taxpayers covering much of that cost. And in Ottawa, City Council approved nearly 419 million for Lansdowne Park redevelopment, sparking public debate about whether this was the best use of public funds. Even smaller scale complaints hit home. Residents consistently question city projects like expensive transit expansion, arena upgrades, or community centers, asking how much did that even cost us? The joke about politicians doesn't land because they're dating celebrities. It lands because people feel their money isn't being looked after. Whether it's federal childcare dollars, diversity, equity, inclusion funding, or stadium mega projects, the lesson is the same. Taxpayer dollars aren't free. They come with rules, oversight, and consequences when those in charge don't manage them responsibly. January the 1st, 2026, what should have been a night of joy, laughter, and celebration turned into one of the deadliest civilian tragedies in modern Swiss history. In the heart of the Swiss Alps, in the upscale ski resort town of Crans, Montana, a New Year's Eve party at a popular bar became the scene of unimaginable disaster. Crans, Montana is known as one of Europe's premier winter destination, a place where skiers, holidaymakers, and young travelers converge for alpine adventure, nightlife, and luxury. On the night of December the 31st, hundreds of people, many of them in their late teens and 20s, excited for the new year, packed into a beloved local bar called Le Constellation. This venue, a cafe by day and a bustling bar and nightclub by night, had long been part of the town's social fabric. Tourists and locals alike gathered there to toast, dance, and ring in the New Year's together. At around 1:30 a.m. on January the 1st, just after the clock struck past midnight, smoke was reported inside the packed basement. Within seconds, the situation escalated into an out-of-control blaze. Eyewitnesses later told reporters that lit sparklers attached to champagne bottles, held high during the celebration, may have touched the wooden ceiling, igniting it, Flames spread at horrifying speed through highly flammable interior, trapping partygoers in a matter of moments. What began as a festive ambience turned catastrophic in seconds. The fire raced across the ceiling and down through the crowd, swallowing light and hope in a blinding inferno. Inside the packed venue, there was no time, no clear path to safety. The bar's basement layout meant that the only stairway leading out was narrow. Tens of young people tried to escape all at once, pushing desperately towards freedom. One young survivor told the Washington Post that he and others had to force a plexiglass window out just to get out, but by then many were already gone. Outside, the freezing alpine air was silent except the sound of sirens and helicopters. Bystanders with jackets, blankets, or even restaurant curtains rushed to help wounded strangers. Emergency services converged rapidly. Dozens of ambulance, helicopters, and firefighters were dispatched, but the scale of the disaster was already too great. This tragedy in Crans, Montana sadly reminds us of a similar case in the United States, one that many people may not know about. On February the 20th, 2003, a packed nightclub called The Station in West Warwick, Rhode Island, hosted a rock concert when an indoor pyrotechnic ignited flammable acoustic foam on the walls and ceiling. The fire spread within seconds, and because the club lacked sprinklers and had insufficient exits, 100 people died and over 200 people were injured. Many of the victims were young concert goers celebrating and enjoying life, just as in Switzerland. The station nightclub fire led to sweeping changes in fire safety codes across the US, emphasizing sprinklers and exit planning and safer building material. Yet even today, cases like this reminds us of the negligence in public spaces can have devastating consequences. Sharing these stories help educate those who may not know and underscores the importance of vigilance and respect for safety standards. The official toll is staggering. Authorities say that as many as 40 people died in the blaze, with 100 more seriously injured, many with life-altering burns and traumas. Most of the victims were young adults and teenagers celebrating life and a new beginning, a fact that has made the tragedy even more heartbreaking. Friends lost friends, families lost children, birthdays, futures, and dreams were extinguished in moments. Hospitals around Switzerland have been overwhelmed, transferring victims from regional facilities to specialist burn units as medical teams work tirelessly. Identification of many victims may take weeks, authorities said. Due to the severity of the burns, flags are lowered around the nation. Support hotlines and crisis centers have been set up for the grieving families. Preliminary investigations have ruled out terrorism. Swiss officials say that the fire appears to have been accidental, likely sparked during celebration, a tragic result of combustible condition, and a crowded space that left little room for survival. But ruling out deliberate malice doesn't ease the pain. This was a preventable disaster, some say a convergence of circumstances where safety measures failed, where celebration collided with danger, and where the youth and joy flipped into tragedy. Crans, Montana, a town of roughly 10,000 people nestled high in the Swiss Alps, is in mourning. Swiss president postponed his New Year's address in respect for the victims and extended condolences to family at home and abroad. From Europe to across the world, messages of sorrow and solidarity have poured in. Young lives lost in the prime of life, ordinary moments gone forever, and a night that should have marked a new beginning instead becoming a somber reminder of how fragile life can be. This tragedy is more than a news story. It's a collective wound, a loss felt by families, communities, and strangers alike. A night that promised hope and renewal turned instead into a heartbreaking reckoning with fate. As families grieve and investigators seek answers, the world remembers the victim, not as statistics, but as young people who should still have been alive. In the echo of that devastating night in the Alps, we are reminded that life's fragility stands beside its beauty, and that every moment is a gift. So this morning, grab your close ones and hold them closely. On January the 2nd, 2026, a violent confrontation erupted in Manhattan Diamond District on West 47th Street involving Max of Tracks NYC and the owner of AK Diamonds. The dispute over a jewelry sale, with Max alleging that a bracelet sold by a rival shop was misrepresented to a customer. Receipts indicated the bracelet was 14 karat gold with VVS diamonds. From my investigation of Max's Instagram, he tested the piece himself using a specialized equipment, demonstrating that it was actually only 10 karat gold and the diamonds were I3 clarity, far below the advertised grade. Max documented the testing in a video, providing clear visual evidence of the discrepancy. Video footage show Freddie Ake spitting in Mac's face, which appears to have triggered the physical altercation inside the store. The footage captures both parties engaged in a pushing and shoving, with counters shaking and items disrupted during the struggle. The NYPD responded promptly, arresting George Ake, 46, and Freddie Ake, 42, owners of the Ake diamonds, for assault, while another person involved reported received a summons. Authorities took statements from both sides and are investigating claims of product misrepresentation. Max was taken to Bellevue Hospital and treated for his injury, which includes visible marks around his neck consistent with physical struggle captured in his video footage. The incident underscores ongoing concerns in Manhattan high-value jewelry market about fraud, product misrepresentation, and personal safety. Jewelers and customers alike face significant risk in high-stake transaction, particularly when authenticity dispute escalates into physical confrontations. Now here's my take, guys. I have followed Max of Chax NYC for years, and what sets him apart isn't just his deep knowledge of jewelry. It's the way he operates with ethics, transparency, and integrity. These aren't just values displayed in the showcase glass of his store. They reflected in how he runs his business and engaged with the industry. Max doesn't simply teach about gold purity, diamond quality, or production costs. He shows people the importance of honesty, fairness, and respect in a world that often rewards exploitation and greed. Max brand isn't about maximizing profit at any cost. It's about doing the right thing, even when no one is watching, even when the system rewards shortcuts, deception, or greed. He walks people through a world where artists are undervalued, customers are misled, and integrity is often sacrificed for dollar. He shows that fairness, transparency, and morality are not weaknesses. They are the pillars of true value. This incident in the Diamond District is not just a story about a fight over a bracelet. It's a microcosm of a world where ethics are optional, honesty is sidelined, and greed is glorified. The Ake brothers misrepresented a product while evolving Max's name, and in doing so, they disregarded something far more valuable than gold and diamonds: trust, credibility, and ethical responsibility. Max's reaction: frustration, yes, but rooted in passion for integrity and fairness. It reminds us that morals and ethics are not abstract ideals. They allow us to build trust, community, and values in a world where algorithms reward idiocy and shortcuts, not thoughtfulness, honesty, or even courage. For those who value morality, ethics, and responsibility, this story resonates deeply. For those who do not, it is a mirror, showing the cost of your choices, the corrosive effect of greed, and the urgency to wake up and start doing what is right. Society does not need cleverness without conscience. It does not need efficiency without ethics. It needs people who will stand for the right thing, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's unpopular. Max embodies that, and in a world of increasingly indifferently to morality, his example challenges all of us. Are you building your life on integrity, or are you feeding the system of greed, of deceit? Starting in January 2026, the US federal government is resuming wage garnishment for default student loans, a program paused during the pandemic. Millions of borrowers who haven't made payments for 270 days or more could see up to 15% of their take-home pay withheld, with employers directed to enforce repayment. Notices are being sent first, giving borrowers a 30-day window to set up repayment plans, requesting a hearing, or rehabilitate loans to avoid garnishment. This comes amid widespread struggles with student debt. According to the Financial Times, at least 9 million US borrowers have missed at least one payment, with roughly 31% more than 90 days delinquent, leaving millions at risk of garnishment. Over 5 million borrowers are already in default, making them eligible for enforcement action, including wage garnishment and tax refund offsets. While Canadians are not subject to U.S. garnishment laws, the story is relevant for context. Government of Canada data shows that more than half of Canadian student loans borrowers report repayment as rather difficult or very difficult, and around 21% have missed at least one payment. National default rates are lower at about 8.2% over a 3-year period, but the financial strain is clear. Students face debt stress that can last years after graduation. For Canadians, this story serves as a cautionary tale. Even without wage garnishment, falling behind on loans can impact credit, financial stability, and long term planning. Young Canadians may draw lessons from U.S. policies and ensure that they understand repayment option, income based plans, and government protection available domestically. Managing debt responsibility is crucial to avoid stress, long term financial damage, or unexpected collections actions. Now, here's my take, guys. For young people watching, you have a few years before you say farewell to some friends, temporarily, for most, possibly forever. High school is a time when you don't think about responsibility or the long term consequences of your actions. You pick something to study, work hard, pass exams, graduate, maybe get a job, and think life will be fine. But the bigger question matters, so here it is. How much will an average car payment be? How much is car insurance for a new driver like yourself? What does a house cost in a nice neighborhood versus a less expensive area? What about mortgage rates, property taxes, and monthly payments? Will your job not only cover these expenses but allow you to save, plan for a family, and stay ahead of inflation or technological changes that could replace your job? This is exactly why so many graduates struggle to pay bills, let alone their student loans, because they aren't asking the right question. It's like the blind leading the blind, except you are leading yourself, and that's okay if you start paying attention now. Millions of Americans are already behind on payments, and in Canada, more than half of student loan borrowers report repayment as difficult, with around 21% having missed at least one payment. These numbers aren't just statistics, they are a warning about what happens when responsibility and foresight aren't practiced early enough. The education system doesn't teach this. Teachers don't teach this. Even parents don't teach this because they are weighed down by their own financial responsibility. But the knowledge gained from experience can and should be passed down. And I'm here to help fill that gap. If you're in high school, start asking the right questions now. Your peers have a wealth of experience, even if it's obscured by monthly bills and responsibilities. Ask, listen, and learn without even revealing why you're asking. Start building your future today. Don't wait. I just turned 40 last month, and in my experience, young people often think they know it all, even without the experience to back it up. It's like taking parenting advice from someone who never raised a child, or business advice from someone who's never built a successful business or a scalable company. Confidence without experience can only take you so far. Experience, on the other hand, is far more valuable than arrogance and empty opinions. So here's my conclusion: there are two types of learners: those who learn the hard way, and those who find the right people for advice and learn the smart way. The latter saves years, money, stress, and heartbreak. And trust me, we all break under pressure. So prepare yourself now. Learn from the right people and think ahead before you start your journey. Or don't. I don't give a. Go about your days like nothing applies to you. Because after all, you already know everything, right? And if that line bothered you, good. That discomfort is the moment growth starts. Maybe it makes you stop and think: have I ever actually asked my parents about money, mistakes, or life decisions? Have I ever sat in their seat and tried to understand the weight they carry? Your parents don't just have opinions, they have experience because they lived it. And for parents watching, this is the moment that matters. When your child starts asking real questions about the future, it means they trust you. It means that they finally seeing the world through your eyes, the bills, the pressure, the sacrifices, the late nights. the nights where you're not eating, the nights that when they try to talk to you and you're not talking back to them. It means that they don't see you as an authority figure anymore. They see you as wisdom. And that's how cycles are broken. And that's how young people stop learning the hard way and start building something better before it's too late. Our top story tonight, a major and unexpected escalation in Venezuela. Early this morning, United States military forces conducted a significant air and ground operation inside Venezuelan territory, targeting key strategic locations, including in and around the capital, Caracas. According to the U.S. official, precision airstrikes and coordinated military actions were carried out before dawn. Explosions were reported by residents across Caracas, and areas experienced disruption to power and communications. The United States confirmed that the objective of the operation was to dismantle criminal and narco trafficking network. In a dramatic development, U.S. forces have captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife and are transported them out of the country. U.S. authorities state that Maduro will be brought to the United States to face charges related to drug trafficking and organized crime. In an official statement, U.S. leadership said that the operation was executed with precision and the efforts were made to minimize civilian casualties. However, independent verification remains limited amid the chaos of the ground. Venezuelan state media has yet to release a comprehensive statement. Local sources report significant confusion among military units and citizens as the nation reels for the sudden incursion. International reaction is pouring in. Many governments are calling for a restraint and respect for Venezuelan sovereignty, while others are signaling support for efforts to hold criminal networks accountable. As of now, details on civilian impact, casualty figures, and the full scope of the operations are still emerging. We will continue to bring updates as the situation develops. And in a move that has stunned the world, Trump announced that the United States will run Venezuela temporarily, overseeing governance until a safe transition of power can take place. On the surface, it feels unprecedented in modern history. But if you look back at human history, this is a familiar pattern. The Roman Empire often placed governors over conquered territories until new leadership could stabilize the region. During China's dynastic transition, generals and officials ruled regions temporarily until a new emperor took power. Even medieval European kings would capture rivals and install regents until heirs assumed the throne. What makes today different is that this is a superpower doing it in the 21st century, a dramatic echo of history unfolding in real time. And that is the latest on the U.S. military action in Venezuela. Stay with us for the continued coverage. This week shows us just how fast the world moves, from rethinking why New Year's resolution used to work, to confronting the harsh realities behind women's rights, liberation, and femicide, to new evidence revealing powerful religious women buried out of medieval history, to Canada opening its first full-scale free grocery store as affordability reaches a breaking point, to political battles over False Claims Act and diversity, equity, inclusion investigation, to $185 million in frozen child care funds, leaving families in limbo, to a New Year tragedy in Crans, Montana, reminding us how fragile celebrations can be, to a violent altercation in New York Diamond District, and finally to U.S. airstrike hitting Venezuela as President Maduro is reportedly detained, underscoring just how unstable the global stage has become. These aren't just headlines, they are reminders that every action, every choice, every decision echoes farther than we think. Stay informed, stay critical, stay compassionate, and remember, the world isn't slowing down and neither are we. And that's it for this week. Until next time, that's what the happened this week. Over and out.
Take me